I could tell myself a story and convince myself, right? You don't know, you're not sure, you're not doing what an executive should do. You don't know enough. Should I be here? Am I doing the right things? Am I good enough? That's the spiral in your mind. And when you're by yourself more, you have more of it.
Welcome to the Lonely at the Top podcast for high-level leaders carrying the invisible weight of the world on their shoulders, because you know the higher you rise, the fewer people you can safely talk to. Here we welcome founders, executives, and decision makers who feel the isolation and pressure that comes with power. Lonely at the Top is your sanctuary in the storm, and I'm your host, soul medic and former psychotherapist Rachel Alexandria. With us today is Erin Reeves, the co-founder and principal at Next Level Org. Erin is an accomplished executive strategist, advisor, and coach with over 25 years of experience shaping people-centric organizations and cultures that align with business goals. With insight and unwavering passion, Erin transforms the gap between knowing and doing into measurable and inevitable progress. That almost sounds like what's the terminal positivity?
That's right.
You will succeed. It is inevitable.
Because we say.
Because we say so.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit more about your experience. You and I are pretty new to each other, and I would just love to hear some things about what got you to where you are now.
Yeah, it's funny. You're describing entrepreneurs and business executives and decision makers, and I find myself in all three camps,
Mm,
with the entrepreneur hat being the newest. But certainly it's fun to be in this space and think about leadership. And lonely at the top is a phrase I've used over and over again for myself personally and
mm.
just in my coaching and in supporting. So my 25 plus years, which is, by the way, what you'll hear from me for the next 10. I've decided to stop counting and just leave the plus sign now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the plus gets me, but definitely we're in the plus category now.
Mhm.
So it is just that rise, right? My lens growing up in corporate America was the HR people operations lens. I went to college for it, which is pretty unusual to go get a business degree with a focus in HR and then spend your whole
Yeah.
career doing it. So
Yeah.
that's an anomaly, and it was kind of by mistake. I was always going to be a business major. And when
Okay.
craft your classes together and what you can take which term, the HR track was my fastest path out. And so
Wow.
that was what I chose. So it was fine, but not super purposeful. It was just like, how can I get out of here as fast as possible? And here we are, 25 plus years later, kind of living in that world. I think, when once you step into that executive hat, whatever lens you bring to the table gets expanded across all of those
Mm.
other elements of the organization that you work in. So you get a unique insight into finance and legal and sales and engineering or manufacturing, depending on what kind of an organization that you're in. And that's one of the things I really loved about wearing that people hat was that
Mhm.
all of those parts of the organization have people. So I had permission to play and learn and understand and poke and kind of stick my nose in places that not all leaders maybe feel like they can.
Yeah. Because you were in HR, you're
Yeah,
saying. Yeah, you got to see everything, really.
it is. It's a see everything role. And it's a role that's positioned to support the employees, but also to support the leaders. And so
Mhm.
that, lots of light in and of that, but have always been aligned with next to locking arms with at each rung of the ladder, leaders in the organization and trying to build that connection between leaders and the rest of the company, the organization, the nonprofit, whatever, wherever I was working at the time.
HR has always been a curiosity for me because, to be honest, I've never worked in corporate.
Yeah.
I've always worked for either the government or myself, so
Hmm.
I think I understand, but
Yeah.
for those who don't really know the inside of HR, what can you say? I don't want people to be bored, like, this might just be a question for me, but if
Yeah.
you were gonna really describe, what is HR really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on where you are because the good answers always start with "it depends," right? I mean, that's just the
Yeah.
way it goes. But I think there's 2 or 3 different elements. I think the first off, which is kind of the me part of HR, which is the policy compliance, the HR lady and,
Mhm.
kind of the rule keeper and the police of the organization. I think,
Yeah.
my opinion is a bit of a bad rap, right? I wanna say not all HR people, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is what it is. And I do think most people operating in integrity want to follow the rules and the laws and
Right.
understand how it works. So that's one component. I do think,
Mm.
too, there's this kind of cultural responsibility that follows under HR, which I actually think lives with all leaders and the whole company,
Mm.
not just HR. But I often see it tucked underneath human resources. And there's this whole other strategic organizational planning, talent development. So there's this arm that is compliance and rules and follow the rules, write the handbook. And then there's this build the organization, create the experience for employees. And I really think of it as enabling employees to do their best work and in line with the company strategy or the organization or the government, whichever entity you're in. But that connecting the dot from the strategy to the
Mm.
people and creating the environment is what does it feel like to come to work that day? But it's also that attract and retain and what benefits are you offering and what professional development and what's the career path and how do we support, mentor our employees? So in my mind, there's kind of this like, here are the rules. The rules are the rules. Let's do the rules. And then there's this create environment where people can come do their best work and putting the right people in the right places at the right time.
I am so glad I asked. What a great explanation. And that's helpful to think about one branch is like the cops and the judiciary, and then one branch is habitat cultivation, essentially,
Yeah.
like work habitat.
Yeah. And it will operate differently in the organization depending on where the leader shows up and what the organization allows. Right. And so
Mhm.
it's like not every sales team, not every engineering team operates the same way. The same is true for HR,
Mhm.
in my experience.
So you said something about walking arm in arm with executive leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's that like? Where did you often find yourself? And because the topic of the podcast
Yeah.
is lonely at the
Only at the
top, you said you often found yourself saying that. We'd love some insight into how did that happen? What was your experience with that? What was
top.
isolating? What
Yeah.
did you do about it?
I think I first noticed that lonely at the top before I got there. And I think,
Okay.
because you're in human resources, often if there's a challenge on a team or with a leader, you're called in as a business partner to work alongside them and help smooth and navigate those waters and figure out the best path forward. And
Mhm.
so you become, in a good relationship and a good HR business partner, someone that they can open up to and talk to and partner with. And if you understand the business and understand people and can put those things together, it creates clarity and confidence for that leader to do what they need to do to move the situation forward.
Mhm.
And oftentimes in those conversations, it was like, oh my gosh, I was afraid to say this to anyone. And I had no idea you could help me. And I feel so much better because I know what to do.
Mm.
And
The
so there
leader
was
would say that to you.
a leader would say that, right?
Yeah.
And like, I've got this thing, I don't know what to do.
Uh-huh.
And they're not necessarily telling their boss that or their peers that, but they sometimes, with a
Mm.
good relationship, will tell their HR business partner that, right?
Gotcha.
And so growing up in being in a role that is supporting managers and employees, being in that position, I got to hear like, oh, I'm not sure what to do.
Mhm.
And people were coming to get support and hopefully getting it. Sometimes good, sometimes
Mhm.
bad. Nothing is all good or
Mhm.
bad. But that was the first time when I started to notice. And then as you climb the rung, you're a supervisor and a manager, a director and a senior director and a VP. And then all of a sudden you find yourself at the top. Each rung is a little bit higher. You don't know what you don't know, and the view changes. I think the steps get bigger as you climb
Mhm.
each rung of that ladder. So when I landed in the executive team, all of a sudden I'm looking around at a table and I'm like, okay, here I am. I'm at the table. And part of it was like, this is it. This is the table. This is really the table. So there's kind of
Yeah.
this question mark piece And then
Yeah.
you look around and you're like, it's that fake it till you make it because you don't really
Yeah.
know. And by the time you're in executive spaces, there's not as many people around you who have been there and done that. There aren't as many peers. Depending on your network, there may not be someone to give you a roadmap, especially if you're in a situation, if you were groomed and someone's second for years and got to come in and see it, that transition might have been easier.
Yeah.
But
That
in my
wasn't your experience?
situation and many others, it's kind of like, well, here you go. And then it's
Yeah.
figuring out what that means. And you can be surrounded by the best team and still feel lonely because you're trying to figure it out. If you're
And you
surrounded by
don't feel like you can go to your colleague who's another executive and say, "How do I do my job?"
I think that's true. I think that's true at every level, and
Uh-huh.
especially true at the executive level.
Yeah.
And I think too, if you like everyone and if there is, some
Yeah.
disconnect on the team, it's that much harder to show vulnerability or feeling like you might be asking dumb questions. And I would say that's asking questions is a really powerful way to test the waters. I think it's a
Yeah.
really powerful tool in the executive suite and in any organization and any level. It's just when you start to ask questions that are insightful or that lead other people to insights, it can be really powerful and a great way to find your place at the table and your point of view and learn. And then have an opinion. You ask good questions and get good answers. They'll make space for you in the conversation.
Can you give us an example? I'd love to hear a story of a
Yeah.
time where you did that. You've created space for yourself through smart question asking.
Yeah. I think I've done a series of M&As in my experience over the years,
M&As.
merger and acquisition. So
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
in an
you.
organization, we might buy this other organization. Usually, by the time I hear about it, we've done some financial and some market assessment, and we start to think about people. And it really is the culture that can make or break and what the plan is afterwards. So I started asking questions about, well, what about this? And how's this going to work? And what's that going to mean? And they started to impact the decision, and they wished that we
Mhm.
had asked those questions earlier. Right. And so then by asking those questions, at whatever time it came into my purview, over time, I got brought in early and earlier because my lens, what I was bringing, my unique perspective, was helpful in the overall decision making process, as an
Mm.
example. And I
That's such a great suggestion.
so that's one element. I would say a second way is to learn more about those areas around you. I wasn't a go to market expert. Still, I'm not an expert, but I know a lot more about revenue funnels and things than I ever did before. And asking questions like, why do you think about it that way? Or what would good
Mhm.
look like? Right? Just some
Mhm.
really basic questions as you're building your own knowledge base of the business because every business is different is just really powerful. And then you have data, and you can take that data with your unique brain and experience and put it together. And I think be really impactful.
You know what's interesting? The last interview I did with John Valencia, he mentioned multiple times having a unique brain. And so I'm noticing thematic elements that move
Yeah.
across the interviews as I do them in this podcast. And starting to really notice that people who are in leadership have unique brains.
Unique brains, and they value their perspective. You have to
Mhm.
think, I bring something no one else does. My
Mhm.
experience, my background, the way I see the world is mine. And how do I share it in a way that's meaningful and impactful and that it's worth it? If I'm thinking a thing, am I the only person thinking that thing? Probably not. But
Mhm.
it's a unique way of thinking, and it's just honoring what you know. You didn't get to that room by mistake, right? You didn't get
Mhm.
there by mistake, and the road you took gave you all of this information. And so you're entering this new place, get a lay of the land, figure it out, ask your questions, and then let your brain do its thing and start to either ask questions or assert or get yourself into those conversations. And don't be afraid to bring your unique perspective. So I'm the only one asking this question is more valuable than I'm the third person to ask the question.
For sure. Yeah. So, well, I hear that that's part of the strategy you used
Mhm.
to find your place
Yep.
in the executive team or whatever as you
Yeah.
up leveled in your different teams. Did that also impact your experience of being lonely or isolated?
What you just heard is the rose-colored version of how that went, right? I
Mhm,
think
mhm.
this is the perspective that this is the 25 plus years of experience. I won't say it always
Right.
went so well.
Uh-huh.
So it's an evolution and it's a practice and it gets better over time. And the lonely at the top internally to organizations, I think there is often kind of a not wanting to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
not wanting to look like you don't know the thing.
Yeah.
Questions is a way around that until you do know the thing. But
Mhm.
I really started to value, when you're in there and you're trying to do it on your own, you have your team and then you have this thing right here, that inside your brain. And that for me, like besides a unique brain, I think that pops out in the lonely at the top for me because I could tell myself a story and convince myself, right? Oh, you don't know, you're not sure, you're not doing what an executive should do. You don't know enough. Those
Mm.
stories that you tell yourself about should I be here? Am I doing the right things? Am I good enough? All of those things. That's the spiral in your mind. And when you're
Mm.
by yourself more and have
You have
fewer,
more of it.
you have more of it. And
Yeah.
so figuring out how to notice it, like, oh, I'm in my head about this is a great place to start. And then what do you do about that? And so that
What do you do about that?
what do you do about that? Well,
Well, I know what I do about that, but I wanna know what you do about that.
people maybe do lots of many things around that, but I see lots of people reading books. I see, podcasts.
Mhm.
I see folks that run and exercise and do, those things
Mhm.
to get what I think about as outside in perspective.
Mm.
Right. And I think you can notice about yourself and get like, is it true? Like you can ask yourself, is it true? Like, how do
Mhm.
I know it's true? And what if it was false? Right. So
Mhm.
there's this mental gymnastics, I call it, right? Like,
Sort of the Byron Katie stuff or,
yeah,
like, CBT kind of
yeah,
questions, yeah.
like, how do I get myself out of my brain and just make sure I at different periods in my life and work life, it wasn't enough to just question myself. I really needed outside in thinking and somebody. So you have to find
Mhm.
somebody that knows enough but not too much, is close but not too close, right? Because you
Mm.
wanna talk about the situation or the thing that you're doing. Sometimes that can be a coach, sometimes it's a girlfriend, and you're not sharing secrets of mergers and acquisitions, like, no one's going to jail for what you're talking about. When it
Mhm.
has to be confidential, it is, but if there are ways to tap on people to get some outside in thinking that I think can really be helpful in getting out of your own way in a leadership role. And if you spend too much time, you have to spend enough time managing yourself that you're in a good place and that you're leading with integrity in yourself so that you can actually lead your team. If you spend too much time inside in that swirl, then the connection to your team tends to fritter away a little bit. So
Mm.
and if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of your team. And so it really is
And you also can't take care of yourself,
right.
right?
Like I can't take care of myself or my team or myself. And then we're
Yeah,
you can get in this cycle. And so both,
yeah.
personal experience and just 25 plus years, hundreds of leaders I've worked around or beside, it's not up and to the right all the time. It goes up and down in terms of how folks are managing and levels of stress. And it has to do with work. It has to do with personal, it has to do with life, right? Life is gonna
Mhm,
life. Right? Things are going to come and
mhm.
it's, our life and our work are going to impact each other and intersect in lots of ways. So figuring out how to do that, how to lead yourself, get your oxygen mask on, think about how to get settled in your team, think about how to impact the broader organization. Those are really what we're just talking about here is the impetus behind leaving corporate and starting an entrepreneur and starting next level org was how can I help leaders make this transition? How can I
Mm,
show up for people in their moment, right?
mhm,
Their moment of struggle, their moment of triumph, their moment of get myself out of my head. How do I
mhm,
help them make that next leadership step on the rung so it doesn't have to be as hard as
mm.
it might have been for me or felt for me sometimes? That's really one of the major motivations to starting a new gig.
So I'm curious, being on the other side now, being the
Mhm.
support system rather than the leader. I mean, you lead your organization, right? But it's different.
Sure.
Do you find it challenging to get leaders to lean on you? 'Cause I know I do.
Yes,
I
of
know that
course.
that's been a challenge over the years.
Yeah, and I resemble that remark. I wanted to do it on my own. Like,
Yeah.
I get it, and it was hard, and I guess my premise is it doesn't have to be so hard, right?
Mhm.
And it's also I also don't think people need other people to be themselves and to do what they need to do. Folks can get through a lot and figure out a lot on their own, but I don't think it has to be as hard, and I don't think it has to take as long. And so folks that do coaching 100% of the time, they're folks who are ready to be coached and want it. Those are the best relationships. You have to be ready,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
open to the idea. I think we do some coaching, but I think the other lens that we approach it from is really there's a business challenge, right?
Mm.
And how am I leading through the business challenge? And sometimes that's an oxygen mask thing is somewhere underneath as we're peeling the onion. And sometimes it's I just took on a new role in an organization and I have to figure out the whole leadership team and what's going on with the business and how to assess talent and who goes where and where are we really strong and where do we need to support. And they just need some outside in thinking and someone to check themselves against that isn't in the team.
Mhm. I have a theory, and I think I'm gonna be asking people this for a while who would know. My theory is that executives who are the most successful with managing and not just fundraising is a whole other thing,
Mhm.
but my theory is that executives who end up being really successful are almost always ones who have some kind of executive coach or support group or support system. Can you speak to that from your experience?
I think that's true. And I think that it's a best kept hidden secret. I
Mhm.
think about Tiger Woods or sports people, Caitlin, she misses her three-point shot. She
Mhm.
doesn't just go out and she might go to the gym and take 300 and find it, but if she can't find it, she goes to her coach or
Mhm.
they bring in a specialist that does just this thing. And that
Mhm.
coach can never be as good as she is,
Mhm.
but he can see what she can't because she's too close to it.
Mhm.
And I think the same is true sometimes for executives. And most executives I know don't want to be ho hum. They want to be great. They want to be the best. They want to lead their organization, to be on stage, to win the awards, to have the best growth. And
Mhm.
it's sad to me that it's such a barrier to get folks to see that calling in expertise and
Mhm.
support isn't about you don't know what to do. It's that no one knows everything and you'll figure it out because you're smart, but you could do it faster and more efficiently by bringing in expertise when the moment is right. And so companies do bring in consultants and coaches. It's not uncommon. It does
Mhm.
happen, but it doesn't happen as much as it could, in my experience, to move things more to make things more smooth and to make things go more
Mhm.
quickly. Often, by the time someone, especially with newer leaders, someone is ready to bring in some outside in, it's kind of broken and it feels like
Yeah.
a crisis and it feels like the it hit the fan and now we have
Mhm.
a crisis. I think what I see for more experienced and second, third, fourth time CEOs is that they know they have a coach or they've had a coach. They have a team around them that they can call
Mhm.
on. They're orchestrating their boards of directors differently to make sure that they have access to the talent and the expertise that they need. And I do think it's a competitive advantage. And I think breaking that seal, right? The first time you go out
Yeah.
for expertise or someone says, "I
Mhm.
think you could benefit from a coach." It's that reaction of, but
I'm
I"
not good enough without it,
Exactly,
right? Which is a lie.
exactly, which I think is a lie too. I agree.
Yeah. I love that. I love that first of all, when my hypothesis that is not based on personal experience, just on
Yeah.
observation gets validated, of course, confirmation bias, yay.
Yes. Yes.
But I think you really have the expertise to be able to say that and to know like, to be able to say with certainty
Mhm.
that 2nd, 3rd, 4th time CEOs already know they need this,
Mhm.
and usually because they've effed it up the first time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they waited till there was a crisis. People who've been through a marriage that fell apart, and maybe they tried couples counseling, but they didn't go until it was already too late. In the psychotherapy world, we definitely talk about there being a point of no return.
Mhm.
When you're at contempt for each other, you're not going to save that thing. The best you're going to do is try to find an amicable split.
Yeah.
So, if everyone listening to this can hear and understand that receiving mental health support in the form of therapy or executive coaching or any doesn't mean you're weak, it actually means you're smart,
Mhm.
and that waiting until something really breaks is probably going to be the most destructive way to do it. That would be part of my mission.
Yeah, I mean, that dovetails really nicely with the work that you've done outside of corporate. And it's not like rosy sunshine and like doomed failure. There's a big spectrum
Yeah.
in between success and, well, just to have an opposite failure. I don't think anything is failure, but it really is a spectrum. And so,
Mhm.
I think, and I say all the time, let's solve these problems and notice them early and often,
Yes.
because it's so much easier to course correct in a small way than to kind of let something
Mhm.
build over time, which is similar to what you're saying, that point of no return.
Mhm.
And sometimes in business, the point of no return comes and goes, and you still have to keep going. You have people's
Yeah.
livelihoods that rely on you. And with relationships in the organization, I think founders and co founders and executive team members and direct report relationships and board relationships, there's so many moving parts and there's so many stakeholders when you're a leader. A single employee, like, no one feels the burden of that like the CEO does, or the
Right.
business owner. And that is just a weight that no one can really take from you, because that is the weight of that position, right? And that weight usually weighs in on every decision that that person makes all day,
Mhm.
right? And so I can come alongside as the HR leader, or used to, and say, I understand, but it's the buck does not stop with me. So you can be a support internally. You can have a great team. You can be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And even yet, sometimes you're too close to the problem,
Mhm.
right? To see it. And so that outside in, it's not that it's going to reveal something that you wouldn't have eventually figured out, or reveal
Right.
maybe,
Yeah.
but I think usually we have the answers, we just can't get to them. It's that knowing and doing gap that I talk about a lot. And
Mm.
sometimes we don't know we know, and that's a thing. And of course, we
Mhm.
all get to keep learning. But when you're in the situation, it's hard to be a part of it and see it
Mhm.
clearly. It's
We
also,
used to refer to that as being on the dance floor and then up on the balcony watching the dance at the same time.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And
very hard to do, especially consistently.
yeah, yeah. And usually when pressure's on, or decisions are hard, or there's a challenge or a problem, we're not normally at our best at doing that. Some people are great. That's awesome.
Mhm.
That you can do it is amazing. Not everyone can. Not everyone can do it well. And it really
Mhm.
is, someone said I have had 175 coffees since November, so I have a lot of anecdotes. But I was talking to someone who's really strong CEO looking for their next gig. And he's like, why would I work with you, Erin, when we think the same way and I already know what you're doing and I agree with you? And I said,
Mm.
well, you'd work with me, right? When you want to move faster, right?
Mhm.
When you want to, and when you get stuck, because
Yeah.
that does happen. Even when you know what you want to do, we all know the things to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Often I think about, everyone knows how many calories to eat every day, how many minutes to exercise, how many hours to sleep. We know, we know
We
so
don't do
well,
it.
but we
Yeah.
don't do it,
Yeah.
right? Or we do it for 2 weeks and then we don't do it again, right? And so it's that's what I mean by
Moving
the,
something from an intellectual space to an execution space or to
yes,
muscle memory or to habit is a totally different thing. Yeah, I make the same points with my clients all the time because they judge themselves sometimes as stupid or whatever. Like, why can't I figure this out? And I'm like,
yeah,
first of all, let's talk about trauma and the effect of trauma on the brain.
yeah.
But it, it's also that they don't know how to do that thing
Mhm.
or they don't know how to get on the backside of a thing they can't quite see.
Yep, yep.
And I think it's maybe harder, and I'm curious if you'll agree, it's maybe harder for people who are at high levels of leadership to be willing to surrender the captaincy, so to speak,
Yeah.
of the conversation to somebody who can help them.
Yeah. I think surrender is a word I don't hear very often in corporate
Mhm.
land.
Mm,
I do think that there's frameworks. So we call it facilitation. I'd love to come in and help you facilitate a conversation or strategic planning session. There are definitely some mechanisms built around that where organizations tap into it. But getting that support for the first time, again, it's just breaking the seal. And then when you see the benefit, and feel and experience having some outside in momentum, some outside in thinking, I think that can be really powerful. And sometimes it's front and center, like a facilitation, and sometimes it's like secret weapon behind the veil. You're coaching
mhm,
someone behind the scenes and they're feeling a way or have a thing, and you're helping them, figure out the way to get into the conversation and have the influence and the impact and to get what I call anchored in what they know, and then how to take that to the team in a way that will be
mhm,
received and have influence and impact that they want to have as a leader in the organization. And it's nuanced and it's
mhm.
different by the person and the organization, but it is with pattern recognition and working with a lot of leaders. Someone will tell me, here's a story of what's happening, and blah, this overwhelm mode, and I listen,
Mhm.
and
And you get it right away.
and I'll say, like, "So what you
Yeah.
mean is," or "What I'm
Uh-huh.
hearing is,"
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and that exact that, like, "Oh,
You're like,
you see me."
how do you know that?" And, like, you're like, "Yeah, I've been doing this for a while."
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I'm
and
the same
that's
way.
and that's the moment where it's like, "Oh, I this is the value," right?
Yeah.
Helping people get there and feel seen and kind of name it, and then
Mhm.
and then start to build their plan. And I think at moments in my career, and I've seen many others be their own worst enemy and get in their own way. And as a
Mhm.
leader, you have to work through that stuff first before you can really step into your full leadership impact.
I totally agree, and I'm gonna make the argument that it's uncomfortable, but there is an element of some surrender.
Yeah.
There is some element of surrender of some component of control to allow somebody else to help you.
Yes.
Surrender of having to know everything, having to lead everything. In my work, I sometimes have to say to people, "You don't need to run this session. You don't have to come with an agenda. That's my job. You don't have to have the story all you don't need to give me a presentation.
Mhm.
Just show up. It's my job to run the session
Yeah.
and to serve you." But yeah, it's a balance that a lot of leaders aren't used to being in because I think they're performing all the
Mhm.
time.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think break the seal is a great way to think of it. The first time I mean, I remember for me, I'm a fairly self-contained, controlling person, and for me, the first times, like, I saw an energy healer or a massage therapist, anybody who was going to have any way of exerting some power over my experience
Yep.
was rough for me. My first therapy session, my first supervision was like, but it's a muscle. It's like a I'm listening to Project Hail Mary right now, so I'm hearing a lot about airlocks. It's kind of like an airlock. You have to go through this process of like, I'm contained, and then okay, I'm gonna put on this suit and I'm gonna cycle through the levels of pressure and then go into a different environment where I can be safe, but it's gonna be in a different way.
Yep. Yeah, and just that you're okay and everything's
Yeah.
fine, and to steal from Brené Brown, that you are enough, you
Yeah.
know? And that doesn't mean that every job or every promotion works out all the time. It's not that everything's always gonna be perfect and up and to the right. That's not what this is
Mhm.
about, but it is really about just navigating better and easier and figuring
Mhm.
out your zone, what I call the zone of genius, right?
Mhm.
It's that special brain and your unique experience and how it all comes together. It is the
Mhm.
moments of sometimes I get into a spreadsheet and I'm so excited about what I can figure out what I'm doing, and it's like 3 hours have passed, and I'm like,
Yeah.
or a jigsaw puzzle, or you're on the phone with a friend and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my
Mhm.
god, dinner's burned," whatever's happening. What are those moments that you get lost in the energy? And I think that those finding those moments and how you do that at work is really interesting. Now, it's not all fun and games If it were, we wouldn't get paid for it. It'd be called a hobby, right? And
Mm.
so it is about the balance, and having enough energy to really lead is a lot. Leading yourself, leading your team, all of that really matters. And so figuring out what those zones of genius are for you. What are those moments that
Mhm.
you're in it and you're doing it and it's working? That's what I find. If you can help folks find that for themselves, then they start to be
Mhm.
able to sustain their
Yeah.
energy and plan their days, their weeks, their months around, oh, strategic planning was coming this fall. We'll be thinking all about 2026. And I'm a big picture thinker and my very favorite time of the year. And August is like everyone's on vacation and I have to account for last year, which is not very exciting for me. But I know
Mm.
planning is coming and I can't, so it's
Yeah,
seasons,
yeah.
it's tasks, it's those kinds of things. But if you find yourself every day is the slog and none of it feels like energy and you're not feeling successful, listening to finding that energy and following it can be really powerful to get your mojo back.
That is definitely wisdom accumulated from 25 plus years that you have, but you got to that wisdom through some difficult times.
Sure.
Is there a leadership decision or season that really tested you that you can tell us about?
I think I'll harken back to landing in that C-suite table. And it wasn't one moment, it was a series of moments over time. And it was rare air. There isn't a manual, and no one said, here's exactly how you do it. And I didn't have anyone to confirm or deny that I was doing it the right way. And so those moments are hard. I think the other leadership moments that are obviously really hard are making hiring and firing decisions. There's all of these
Mhm.
moments that come. We're, pivoting the organization. We were focused here and now we're going to focus over in this other direction, which means a lot of movement and change for everybody in the organization. And there's a lot of change management in those kinds of big decisions for organizations. And you kind of have to do it for yourself first. And,
Mhm.
most leaders are operating from integrity, right? They have a thing that they want to do and a way they want
When
to
you
do.
say when you say do it for yourself first, what do you mean?
I
Do
mean,
what
you
for
have to kind
yourself?
of get right with it, right? You have to find your
Gotcha.
integrity in a situation.
Mhm.
Right? So no one wakes up every morning and says, "Gosh, I can't wait to do a layoff today." Like that's not a
Right.
thing that people do, or willy-nilly, we're going to not do this and do this now. Like there's usually,
Mhm.
whether folks agree or disagree, right? There's usually a lot
Mhm.
of thought and purpose behind it. And when you find yourself in a room where you agree, it's easier than when you find yourself in a room where you don't. And you almost will never always
Mm.
agree with everyone all the time. And so
Mhm.
that as a leader, your job is to influence decisions and bring your best thinking. And sometimes it's this agree to disagree, agree, disagree, and commit. There's all sorts of language around it, but you got to get good with decisions and moving forward so that you can lead your team and the organization through those changes. And I think I said it before, the mental gymnastics of, I don't want to do this, or I wish we didn't have to do this. But in the universe that is, we have to make a decision. And this is the
Mhm.
really hard decision. And then how do we communicate that in a way? And how do we share that with the rest of the organization so that people can come with us on this journey and understand enough of the decision making? Those are the things that weigh, I think, on leaders a lot in times of challenge, right? When we're growing and everything's great, it
Mhm.
feels better. So it feels easier. And I think growth is great, whether you're growing bigger or growing smaller. It's the same amount of
Mhm.
work, it just feels different. So as a leader, getting comfortable in the uncomfortable and figuring out how to center yourself in those decisions and be to your organization what they need to see, I think is super important.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's good advice. Getting right with what you need to do, even if you didn't agree. I
Yeah.
think that's a big challenge, and it's an invisible cost that a lot of leaders are paying that people don't realize.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the private ledger section of this show, which is getting into your balance sheet of burdens.
Yeah.
So, we would love to hear one cost you paid for being in leadership.
Yeah. I think I definitely paid the energy cost.
Mm.
you know, I
Mhm.
and so much of it in retrospect was self-inflicted.
Okay.
that voice in my mind. Not always, but over time, it's like, "Oh, I could have been nicer," or you could have asked for
Mm.
outside. As soon as you say it out loud, someone's like, "No, that's not true." You talk to yourself in a way you would never talk to your friends. And so I
Mhm.
definitely, as one thing, be nicer to yourself and spend a lot of energy expansion that wasn't necessary is what I
Mm.
in hindsight.
Yeah, a lot of spin meaning kind of like the mental gymnastics or, like, self-recrimination kinda stuff.
Yeah, just am I good enough? Am I doing it well? Do they like
Mhm.
me? All of that stuff I
Mhm.
think can really get it's really distraction from what you want to be doing, which is your job and leading and making improvements and creating great places to work and having success. And when we get in our heads in a way that isn't helpful, we got to get out of it so that we can do what we're there to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. What in your balance sheet of burdens is one invisible asset that you had that you maybe didn't realize at the time?
Yeah, I think there's a resiliency piece that most leaders find themselves in, and I don't have any regrets. All decision I make them again, not make them again. It brought you to where you are today, and this is where you're supposed to be. So that's kind of how I operate. So it's not a lesson, but resilience is important and appreciating that outside in thinking, just knowing that when I convince myself of a thing, I just turn to your neighbor and ask them, "Do you think this is true?" Is a really simple way sometimes, or a coach or a family member or somebody that you trust is letting someone in a little bit can be super, super powerful and reaffirming, and just kind
Mhm.
of help you move through that. It's like, "Oh, I'm doing that thing again. Oh, now I can see I'm doing that thing again." And so there's self-awareness, resilience, using your resources. Those are things that were once invisible, completely
Mm.
invisible, that are definitely
Yeah.
now more in the light, and yet still need reminders, right? From time to time that you're doing the right thing. You understand what you're doing. You got this, Erin.
Nice. And that you sounds like you've got support around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Alright, in your private ledger, what is one investment that you're making in yourself for your well-being, your soul?
Yeah, I think time and space. I talk a lot about the power of pause, and this is new to me. I'm very much kind of Heidi, very control, get it done, have the list, do all the things, be busy all the time. And the shift really is to create space to think and to
Mm.
notice and to not have to fill all the gaps is a transition and a noticing thing that I'm doing about myself that I think is really valuable in life. Like, oh, I care
Yeah.
about this. I don't care about that. Or,
Yeah.
you know, those aha moments come when you create space for them. And good
Yeah.
things come into your life when you create space for it. And making rest and open space a thing that I have to check off my list of things to do was a really big transition for me and for some other leaders too. We used to
Yeah.
I say busy's like a badge of honor. "Oh, how are
Yeah.
you busy?" Right? And
Yep.
full calendar, meetings all day. I'm so important. All these people need me. And then it maybe isn't the best use of your time. It maybe isn't using your zone of excellence,
Yeah.
zone of genius. So getting out of that, being busy isn't good or bad, but being busy not at your highest purpose is crazy making. So creating room for
But if I'm
pause.
always busy, if I'm always needed, I'll never be alone.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you're more alone than ever.
Yes, you actually are much more alone, but yeah, that's often what's driving that one is being needed is a great way to never be abandoned, right?
Until you
Sounds
abandon
like you
yourself.
what's that?
Until you
Yes, if
abandon
you're
yourself, which is so
you're
much what
abandoning
happens.
yourself.
In that empathy world, you
Absolutely.
give to everybody else and you're last on the list and eventually it
Mhm.
shows.
Yes, it does. Yeah, you and I obviously are we could have really deep psychological conversation. Well, what do you wish and you've known so many leaders, so I think I'm really interested to hear what you're gonna say to this. What do you wish more leaders felt permission to say out loud?
We should ask an expert. Right? And it goes
Mm.
back a little bit to vulnerability. I think it's really hard to say, "I don't know." I mean,
Mhm.
that's really hard to say. So what are the other ways to say that?
Oh,
Or
that's great.
I'm not sure, or we should ask an expert, or who's the expert in this? Who should we be looking to for insight and answers? Where should we be looking? I think thinking we have to have all the answers isn't the answer. So
Yeah,
that is
that's your bumper right there. That's the trailer for this show. I love it.
so that's what I wish.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree. I think that having alternate ways to say things that feel uncomfortable is such a strong strategy. You don't have to say, "I don't know," but saying, "Who should we ask? Who's the expert in this? Let's find the best people to help us make this decision." So much better.
Mhm. And sometimes
Well,
the answer is in your organization. It's not always outside,
Mhm.
right? It could be just outside the leadership team. So
Yeah.
I think that that's another interesting. Sometimes the answers aren't in the room and you got to look outside the room.
Mhm. I think a lot of times maybe the answers aren't in the room. People are leaders because they're good at making decisions and winning over people who are powerful. And maybe they're good at strategy. Maybe they're good at all of the different things that their job entails, but they're probably not anywhere near the expertise of the engineer on the factory floor or whatever. You can tell I haven't worked in corporate. I'm probably saying that not correctly, but the subject matter experts almost never are in the C-suite.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to our final question, the time machine question,
Yeah.
I would love for you to share with people how they could find you if they want to work with you and your 25 plus years of
Yes.
expertise.
Plus, 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 plus years.
Plus, plus,
Yes.
plus, plus, plus.
So what we have a website, www.nextlevelorg, and we are a .net. Erin at nextlevelorg.net gets you directly to me. Certainly, we're on LinkedIn as well, Next Level Org, and also my name, Erin Reeves. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We're doing free 30-minute consultations right now. So if you want to connect on the website and get signed up, we can spend a little bit of one-on-one time and figure out if we can't get you on a good path.
So, who would know that they're a good client for you? How would they know that?
Yeah, I think it's leaders usually who are feeling a little stuck, right? And
Mhm.
so either there's, next level org goes next level org team and you,
Mm,
right? And so we really think about it in three layers. And often we're helping leaders either help themselves, help their teams, or help their whole organizations.
mm,
So we're a good fit for you if you're a leader who's like, I need help with my oxygen mask. Like, oh my
mm,
gosh, what am I doing? I'm stuck. I'm in my brain. I need a little bit of outside in thinking to help me move myself, right?
mm,
You might be on a team, you might be a leader on a team that's newly forming or run into some bumps in the road and you need some outside in thinking to help navigate and translate and create facilitation and container to solve some of those maybe team level issues. And then from an organization perspective, we were talking about before, right? We're going to do merger and acquisition, we're going to do a bunch of hiring or some laying off, or we are going to switch product lines and the whole organizational design needs to look different.
mm.
And maybe no one does that. And so it is meeting the leader at their moment. And sometimes that moment is themselves, sometimes it's the team, and sometimes it's the organization.
Nice. So that's at nextlevelorg.net.
Yes.
Great. That'll be in the show notes too. So if you are listening to this, you can always go to the more info in the show and find those links. Okay, so here's our last question. We're going to open the time machine. Cue time machine noise. And you're about to step in. You can step in and go to any time in your past history. Where would you go and what would you say to that earlier version of yourself?
I would say in my mind it goes back to early parenthood time frame for me, which is,
Mm,
roughly 15 to 16 years ago, still in corporate, still climbing and doing the things. And what I wished I'd known is that I was going to be okay and that
mm,
everything's going to be okay, Erin. And yes, you're good and you're fine. And just keep going and get out of your own head, get out of your own way. You don't have to do it by
mm.
yourself, both in the home front and in the work front, the life. I lost my mom around that same
Mm,
time too. So it was
mm.
I did a lot of that on my own, and I didn't have to, I didn't need to, but I did. And I learned a lot. Distraction is really powerful. So when you want to
Yeah.
be distracted from the hard thing, can throw yourself into something else, and nothing is all good or all bad. And I
Right.
wished in hindsight I'd had a little bit more balance and asked for help,
Mm.
more personally at that time to help you get through that. And you never get over it, right? But you learn to carry it better, is
Yeah.
what I would say.
Yeah. That's very, profound and supportive advice that I'm sure some of our listeners will also really benefit from. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining me for the show today.
So fun, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Lonely at the Top. If today's conversation resonated, I hope you'll give yourself permission to pause, even for just a moment, and check in with what you might be carrying. You don't have to hold it all alone. You've carried a lot to get where you are, but you don't have to keep doing it without good support. I work with high level leaders who want to clean up their secret messes. So if you want to learn more, find me at rachelalexandria.com. If you know another leader who would benefit from hearing this podcast, please send it their way. Because, it's lonely at the top, but it doesn't have to stay that way.